Welcome back to the podcast. Today we have Tom Cronin. Hello, Tom. Welcome.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for inviting me along today.
Amazing. Guys, just to give you some background, Tom Cronin spent 26 years in the finance markets as one of Australia's leading bond and swap brokers. He discovered meditation in his early stages of his career when the anxiety and chaos he was experiencing had hit a crisis point, completely transformed his world, both professionally and personally. Founder of the Stillness Project, a global movement to inspire 1 billion people to sit in stillness daily. Tom is passionate about reducing stress, chaos in people's lives. His ongoing work in transformational leadership, coaching, and corporate training has seen him working with some of the top companies like Amazon, Boston Consulting Group, Harvard Business School, Qantas, UBS, and Coca-Cola. He's spoken on stages at conferences like Ad News Summit, AdWest, Wanderlust, and Mindheart Connect. Tom has 6 books published and produced a hit documentary film, The Portal. And he is my current mentor, which is amazing. So grateful to have you on, Tom. Thank you.
Yeah, it's great. So good to be here. Looking forward to our conversation.
I love it. So I would love to dive into chatting about meditation today. I had a little ping in my ear today that was like, Riley, you need to meditate today. And then realizing we had also our catch up, which was just so aligned. So why is meditation being so profound in your life and for others, have you found?
The type of meditation that I do is a particular style called Vedic meditation, also known as transcendental meditation. And one of the greatest benefits that comes out of this particular style of meditation is the phenomenally deep levels of rest we get in our physiology. Now, that surprises a lot of people initially because they're like, well, isn't meditation a spiritual practice, or isn't it about, accessing my archangels, or isn't it about aligning my chakras? But for this particular style of meditation, the primary focus is on getting profoundly deep levels of physiological rest. And what they found is that when the mind transcends, what that means is that the mind is no longer thinking, yet it's still awake. That's a very profound state to be in, that your mind is awake and conscious as opposed to asleep and unconscious, and there's no movement of thought. So this is what we call transcendence, otherwise known as turiya in Sanskrit, meaning the fourth state. So it's a state beyond thoughts, it's a state beyond deep sleep, it's a state beyond dream state. Now, when we get into this state of being awake and not thinking, the body physiologically drops into a profoundly deep state of metabolic rest, 4 times deeper than sleep. And that's because the body is awake and alert, it is conscious, but there's no movement of thought. Now, every thought has a corresponding biochemical reaction, has a corresponding physiological reaction, and we're having 40 to 50,000 of them every day. So that's a lot of movement, a lot of fluctuations happening in our nervous system, in our body, in our biochemistry. So when we stop all of that, the body drops very deep in rest. And when the body goes into deep rest, it starts to heal. So what we find, and we use the same analogy of a broken leg, when we have a broken leg, we put a cast around it, and that cast creates stillness. And that allows the body's natural intelligence within the body to start healing. The cast doesn't fix the leg, a doctor doesn't fix the leg, medicine doesn't fix the leg. The intelligence within the body knows how to repair that damage. And so what we do find primarily, first and foremost, is a great deal of repair happening in the body. So for me, it was anxiety, panic attacks, insomnia, agoraphobia, constant colds and flus, viruses. Simply, most of them just melted away as a result of me getting phenomenally deep states of rest from meditation. So that's the biggest and the most profound shift we see happening.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. That's yeah, really great description of what's happening in the brain as well. Um and so what do you find like what did you find when you first discovered meditation, and how long did it take you to get into those states? How long did you find it took you to make those shifts essentially?
Yeah, it's really quite rapid. Most of my students and myself included will in the first, second, or third session drop into those really deep states. And the way that we get into those deep states is using a mantra, which is a primordial resonance that each student will get based upon how old they are when they're learning to meditate. And that mantra does all the meditation work for you. It puts the mind from a beta brainwave frequency into those deeper delta brainwave frequencies, as a result of the repetition of that sound. And so I've found very distinct changes within the first few days of me learning to meditate. I was actually just finished a training program with a lady just then, and she said, firstly, she's 60 odd years old, and she said, firstly, I really struggle sleeping, but last night she learned a meditation for the first time yesterday. It's 4 sessions over this week, and she said that was the best and deepest sleep I've ever had last night. And the second thing was, she said, I just felt really calm all through the day. It was really quite interesting. And that's after just having 2 meditations.
Wow, wow, that's incredible. And what is the difference between like this style of meditation versus others? I know you touched on some more about like meeting guides and things like that, which is probably the first meditation that I discovered, and now I channel meditations with
Mhm.
to meet guides and different processes. But what was it about Vedic over any other style that you were kind of more lenient towards?
Yeah, I tried so many different meditations leading into this one. I remember going to a chakra lining meditation course, and there was those Vipassana style meditations where you just had to try and still your mind and focus on one thing. And I just found them very, very difficult from the state that I was in. Not to say there's anything wrong with those meditations or they're not good or not supportive. Definitely, there's so many benefits that come out of those types of meditations. But what I found was that it just was really difficult because I was in a really stressed state. I was experiencing a lot of anxiety, a lot of panic attacks, a lot of depression, a lot of addictions, and my body was riddled with stresses. So meditation is quite physiological in some respects. And to get into meditations, we need to have a quiet, calm physiology. And if the meditation doesn't lead us to that state, then it's going to be hard for us to meditate. And so I just found them very difficult, very uncomfortable. And some of them, I found them more stress inducing because it was frustrating not being able to meditate when I thought I should be meditating. And that's because just trying to force the mind to be still or trying to sit still when there was just no chance that I was going to be able to do that led me to a bit of a sense of lack of success with the experience.
Mm-hmm. And for people who are kind of just starting out meditating, I find this rhetoric of like trying to sit still, but like I'm not meant to think or I'm not meant to do anything. What is it that you experience during your meditations to kind of give people context? Because I
Mm.
think there can be sometimes confusion when people do start out that they're meant to not have thoughts or anything. And I don't agree with that. I think we always have a filtering process.
Yeah, look, I mean, one thing we understand about the mechanics of the mind is that it's always seeking charm, it's seeking pleasure. And this is why it loves TikTok, it's why it loves Spotify, it's why it loves Netflix. This is not you that loves those things, it's your mind and your biochemistry. And the mind is always looking for is this information. It's looking for rumination, it's looking for contemplation, it's looking for data, analysis. And so if we are giving the mind all this information, all this data, all this analysis, all this charm, all this pleasure, and then we say to the mind, now stop. The mind's like, no, I just don't want to do that. Like it's really uncomfortable for us to stop thinking. So what we do with the Vedic meditation methodology is we introduce charm. So we know the mind is looking for charm, and it will always go and seek charm every single day, 40, 50,000 times a day, looking for charm in thoughts. So we replace the charm of thinking with the charm of the mantra. So rather than having chocolate ice cream, we say, why don't you try this pistachio messina ice cream? And you're like, oh my gosh, the chocolate was good, but this is amazing. So now we've replaced one pleasure with another pleasure, which is the mantra. And now the repetition of the mantra soothes the mind naturally through its resonance. The delta brainwave frequency of that mantra will by default, through the repetition, put the mind deeper and deeper into levels of quiet composure, quiet stillness. And then what happens is as the mind goes deeper and quieter away from the external world of form and phenomenon, it starts to get tantalized by the blissful charm of Turiya, transcendence. Now, there is nothing actually more blissful for the mind than this utopian paradigm of what we call samadhi in Sanskrit. Samadhi is where we get 2 words in English. Sama is where we get the word same, and dhi means intellect. So samadhi means the same intellect. The intellect's not moving because it's satiated, it's fulfilled, it's filled with bliss. And this is how the mind will become still, because it is satiated by the bliss of being. And that's how we get into those long, deep states of meditation.
Amazing, amazing. And so you often mention quite a few Sanskrit quotes or words, which I quite resonate with because for anyone who doesn't know, when I got activated with light language, I was now speaking Sanskrit. I was like, what's this? And I think that's why I connected deeply with you and working with you because you were kind of connected in that space. How did you kind of start understanding the body of work, I guess you'd call it?
Yeah, one thing that I love about the learning of Vedic meditation is that it's not just here's a mantra, go and meditate. You can't do that on a YouTube video or an Insight Timer app, because there is a depth of body of knowledge that comes with the training. One thing that's really important, my mum was a science teacher, and then she said that when we're doing science, you have to have prac and theory. And the prac is the practical experience of how to make rotten egg gas. And then the theory is, how did that actually happen? What's the science behind that? What's the methodology? What's the knowledge that comes with that? And so what I love about the Vedic tradition and how we deliver the meditation course is that you get so much knowledge from ancient Sanskrit dialect to the wisdom and philosophy of the nature of the universe and the nature of life, the seven states of consciousness. There's a really deep body of knowledge that you can go right down that rabbit hole if you want to go further into the knowledge and science of that. But in the course, they give you a nice big bite, I wouldn't say bite-sized chunk, a big chunk of that wisdom over 4 90-minute sessions. So the meditation itself is 20 minutes, but the course itself is 4 90-minute sessions, usually over a weekend or over a week.
Yeah,
And that's
amazing.
where you pick up a lot of that knowledge comes through the training.
Great, great. That's incredible. Um, and I mean, you've done so many just just yeah. Sorry, I don't know what I was asking then. Um, uh, yeah, I guess like what else are you passionate about? I'd love to just talk more about um you've done so many things since you've started in this space. Where do you feel like, moving into the next 5 to 10 years, like where do you feel like there's deeper impact to have and kind of like what are you sort of looking at impact? You continuing the stillness movement and, inspiring people to reduce stress and chaos, but has anything come up for you that you've in your awareness for in the future?
Sure, there's so many, almost too many different places that I feel pulled and drawn to go with my work. Only recently, I stumbled across a video of what's happening in Sudan. And if anyone doesn't know, because it's not getting much airplay, unfortunately, no one really wants to know about what's going on in Sudan, but it's horrendous. It's probably like hell on earth right now. And one of the most horrendous things that are happening there doesn't get a lot of publicity because it just doesn't seem to be picked up by the mainstream media. But, when I see things like that, it inspires me to think we still have so much inner conflict. We still have so much programming, so much trauma, so much religious indoctrination, so much segregation and separation, so much my way is better than your way, so much you have something I want. And this is all what we call Maya, the illusion. And one thing I know that Vedic meditation doesn't make us perfect. By no means, I'm still working some of this stuff out myself. But it gives us the experience of a unified field of interconnectivity. And what gets born out of that experientially, as we transcend form and phenomenon, this is the importance of transcending in meditation. Most meditations don't give us the sense of transcendence. A lot of meditations can make us more abundant, can make us more affluent, can make us more find love, can make us have our chakras aligned, but that still keeps us in the individualized identity. Now, to transcend the individualized identity, that is, you're not thoughts, you're not feelings, and you're not a physicality, you're part of a unified field, then what happens is we start to stabilize the fundamental reality that we are a unified field. And what gets born out of that is pure compassion, pure love, pure interconnectivity. So it's very hard to have this sense of my way is better than your way. You're right. I'm right. You're wrong. I don't like your religion. I don't like your race. I don't like your political ideologies. But to transcend all of that and start to experience this deeper sense of connectivity brings so much more love and compassion into connectivity through the planet. And that really motivates me. But so like I want to teach in schools, I want to teach in companies, I want to teach in Sudan, but I can't do all of that. So now one of my greatest passions is to inspire and motivate other conscious leaders in the world. That's training more Vedic meditation teachers, but also supporting people like yourself, conscious leaders, to do whatever their work is. It's not all about Vedic meditation. We need everyone doing their bits and bobs. We need the people to do the spirit guides and the channeling. We need people to do the breath work. We need people to do the yoga. We need people to do the plant medicine, whatever the pathways that people are feeling aligned and capable of teaching and sharing and inspiring in others, then part of my work is to help them have greater impact in the world and reach more of the world that
Yeah,
needs it.
amazing. Yeah, it's I love like hearing about this style of meditation because I definitely want to explore it. And yeah, I've always found meditation is such an incredible way to connect with like your higher self, firstly. Because I talk a lot about like trusting your intuition, connecting with your higher self and receiving messages to navigate life, and then also to meet your team. And from that, they're also able to give you messages on what you're able to sort of create, because it's like we're always co-creating as well. So I just love I want to say like complexity that meditation can offers, being so many styles and so many ways to receive like breakthroughs. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a holistic approach to well-being and awakening in life, and I think there's not one cure-all, although some people will believe that their way and their tradition is the only way. But I just think we have to really look at such an array of options and offerings and methodologies. For me, I use many different tools and processes to support my journey into awakening. And I think, everyone should have a healer, everyone should have a guide, everyone should have a meditation teacher, everyone should have a coach, everyone should, try all these different things as much as they can, because yeah, it really needs a very holistic approach to this.
Yeah. And you talked a lot about the inner conflicts. And I know you've spoken about some of the levels of consciousness, and, a lot of people are kind of in that fear, sort of fear to ego consciousness, and they're struggling to shift through out of their self into the unity. How do you feel like how could someone best shift in out of that into a higher consciousness through the methods that you've experienced?
It actually happens by default. Two things. Firstly, it is through direct experience. When we transcend, we start to realize and experience that you exist even though you don't have a thought. You exist even though you don't identify with a physical form. When we transcend, people sense this weird sensation of losing their body. Starts with losing their hands and then they lose their body. It's like, I don't know where I went, but it just felt like I had no body. And that's because
Wow.
they became part of the subtler field, not the dense field. And we know that there's a subtle field. Even Einstein talked about unified field theory. And we know that there's a science sort of layer of reality that's beyond form and beyond phenomenon. And so, firstly, we want to make that experiential. And that's where most meditators will experience that in the first few meditations, that there's this reality that isn't clearly defined by the form of a thought, a feeling, or a physical object, meaning their denseness. But the secondly is understanding the ideology of that, the philosophy of that, and understanding the science of that is really important, that we get that on an intellectual level as well. So we need those two things experience, and we need the understanding and the philosophy behind that. And that, I believe, is a really important component. I talked about on my group meditation this week. We have a weekly catch up for all my students. And I talked about the self with a capital T and S, and myself with a small m and a small s. So myself is my ego. And my ego is defined by my thoughts, my feelings, and my physicality in the interaction or the relative world that I'm interacting with these three layers of identity. But the self is a non-changing state of consciousness itself. It's just presence. It's just simply witnessing. And it's witnessing from bliss, it's witnessing from love, and some will call it God, the source, divine, presence, unified field. There's so many different ways of describing this fundamental reality. And we need to integrate myself or ourself with the self, capital S and small s. That infusion is critical. And the analogy I like to use is like, it's like a wave realizing that it's the ocean, yet understanding and experiencing itself as the wave at the same time.
Mm. Yeah, amazing, amazing. That makes a lot of sense. Mm. I've got a bit of brain fog today.
That's
I've got
okay.
no flow state. That's yeah, I don't know. That's strange of me to have that done.
Maybe we're just in a state of transcendence. Sometimes the mind just becomes this spacious void. People are like, it must be amazing in your mind. It's like, to be honest with you, it's just an empty vacuum most of the time. There's nothing going on.
Yeah.
It's just a quiet, peaceful void of nothingness.
And I think that's like such a nice feeling. Like it's actually interesting that I'm experiencing this level that there's no thoughts right
Mhm.
now,
Mm.
because that is very much like the potential of meditation is to like release that. So it's actually quite interesting because I'm always like flow state, like get the
Mm.
conversation
Mm.
going. But in meditation, it's like you're able to release that.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We spend so much of our life entertaining thoughts and trying to have thoughts. If we've got negative thoughts, we go to psychology and we try to shift those thoughts from negative to positive. But quite often, we'll actually entertain negative thoughts because we like ruminating, we like worrying, we like, um, you know, for future forecasting and getting anxious, and we like going on scary rides and watching scary films. So we like a lot of these thoughts, whether negative or positive. But really, quite interestingly, one of the most profound human experiences we can have is to actually just have no thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah, that would
And
be like quite nice.
yeah, well, that's where one of the most highest vibrations of the human experience prevails, which is peace. Peace is actually
Mm.
this, we call in Buddhism, emptiness, where the mind is just empty. And that's where real enchantment and real joy and the arising of love comes from, is not by thinking something positive or trying to avoid something negative, but to actually just not think.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like anyone listening could really dive into that, like just taking a moment to think, like, not think, to experience. Yeah. If you didn't have to have that overthinking mind, like I know I've struggled with that personally. It's just this constant, like, worry and coming from anxiety and those things. So it's like just to release that, even for like 10 seconds for people can be such a release and like, yeah. So that's beautiful. I did just have a piece drop in then as
Yeah,
well.
go for it.
So
Let's go while we're on the thread.
your global movement to inspire 1 billion people sit in stillness daily. And I know you've done the portal. I'm yet to watch the movie, so that will be my task soon. Is what do you feel, and maybe this is a part of what you've done in the movie, I'm not sure. What do you feel like could impact or would be of change to humanity? And I guess if another 100, 200, 1 million people were meditating, how much impact do you feel like that would have? Is it more around the coherence and love piece?
We would certainly see a lot less conflict.
Mm-hmm.
We would see a lot less violence. We would see a lot less addiction. We would see uh, a greater level of interconnectivity with the planet itself. So, one of the things that is happening with humans is a distinct separation from the natural world. We see the natural world as a place of exploitation. What can I get out of the ocean? What can I put into the sky and get out of the sky? What can I get out of bees? What can I get out of trees? We don't value nature itself. We value the commodity we can extract from nature. So, as humans, when we see people reaching greater levels of enlightenment, there's a greater level of interconnectivity with the planet, an appreciation of our position in the planet. We think we're a superior race, and that's why we exploit the planet like we do. But in actual fact, try living without bees if you think you're more superior than bees. Try living without fungi if you think you're more superior than fungi. Try living without, trees if you think you're more superior than trees. So it's about humans
Wow.
repositioning themselves into equanimity and their role and interplay with the planet. I think we'll see a lot more of that. I think we'll see a greater redistribution of wealth. Doesn't necessarily mean we have socialism or communism, but what it would mean is that there'll be greater appreciation of kindness and sharing and generosity. So yeah, there's just so many different things that come out of a human simply sitting and closing their eyes and reaching a deep state of inner peace. And from that, there's incredible things happen. And one of the things that I noticed the most, which is inspiring me with the Stillness Project and this mission to inspire 1 billion people to meditate daily, is that we have two sources of fulfillment. Now, 99.999% of the world's population are in what we call outcome-oriented fulfillment mode. That is, that my fulfillment is only an extraction from action or acquisitions. If I get a new dress, if I get a new haircut, if I find someone to love, or someone loves me, if I get a new house, if I get a good job. So what it means is that I need an outcome or an acquisition to activate a response in me, which will be some degree of fulfillment. This is what we call outcome-oriented fulfillment. So every single action on the planet is generally motivated in the quest to find fulfillment from the action. Listening to Netflix, watching Netflix, listening to Spotify, eating ice cream, going to the gym, getting a good job, paying my rent, going to do the grocery shopping. All action is a way for us to extract and almost receive some sort of fulfillment from that. Now, the other source of fulfillment, which is quite profound and very rarely accessed on the planet right now because of the state of consciousness that we're collectively in and the era that we're in, is what's called self-referred fulfillment. And that's a fulfillment that we know enlightened people experience. It's an arising of bliss within. It's an arising of love and peace and joy within. It's an arising of enchantment that comes not from acquisitions or actions, but for simply being in their true nature. And our true nature at its subtlest level is enchantment. It is bliss. It is love. And when we're independent of outcomes or acquisitions for our fulfillment, it's a phenomenally different way of living in the world. So I'm not saying that I'm fully in that state myself either. I still enjoy acquisitions and outcomes. But if we look at enlightened people on the planet, they tend to live extremely simple lives. Caves, monasteries, ashrams, very little dependence on acquisitions or outcomes for a degree of fulfillment because they're already arising with the bliss that's within them. So then what we have is outcome, then we have action from fulfillment rather than action for fulfillment. Very different.
Wow, yeah. And do you feel like the difference is ego?
That's right. Yeah, it's ego. It's the
Mm,
degrees of
mm,
ego. Yeah.
mm,
Ego will never be fulfilled. Ego
mm,
actually by its current nature, its characteristic, which is unchangeable, is that it will always be in a state of lack. It will never be complete. It will never be fulfilled. It will never be satiated fully. Might be
mm.
short-term fulfillment, but I've met some of the richest people on the planet. One gentleman had $350 million in his bank account after selling his business. Bought a $50 million palatial mansion on the Amalfi Coast in Italy. Butlers, maids, chefs, 5 of the most luxurious cars. It was miserable.
Yeah, and I've seen some, even some, I think one of the found one of the, entrepreneurs on Shark Tank, he said some, I think the Uddy's founder, he
Yeah.
said something like, I've done the business. I'm ready for my spiritual awakening now.
Oh, wow.
So it's yeah, I love that we have opportunities to do it in tandem
Hmm.
as well. So it's just what people prefer and what state they're in at the time and I think also their need, right? Their survival need or the why behind what they're doing as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, we're all at different stages in our life. Someone who's doing fourth year quantum physics at university will have different needs and educational requirements and experiences than someone that's in first class maths doing 1 + 1 = 2. Now, 1 + 1 = 2, that child learning at that particular point in time is not better or worse. It's just what they need to be going through at that particular point in their evolution.
Mm. Yeah, so children, this is a great topic because I've been watching some videos on social media and I believe it's in India and the kids are learning like intuition and chat and like I would channeling, I guess. So I love that, seeing how we can meld meditation with children now and like what are the impacts? Because, I've started meditating, you've started meditating later in our life, right? So what could be the impact or your kind of prediction around children who meditate at a really early age and that in their kind of lifespan? How do you feel like that, just from your experience and
Mm.
understanding meditation?
Yeah, it would be ideal to have children all meditating at a young age. It's very hard to get them meditating because they're still enticed by the world around them. They haven't quite
Mm.
exhausted that as an avenue for fulfillment. So it's just natural in the younger years of children's lives. And this is why we don't force it on children. We don't, my children could learn and did learn at the age of 6. It's the youngest we like to teach children, no younger than that, because of the developmental phase of the brain. But 6 till 7 is the earliest. And then once they had the technique, they had it at their disposal and they were able to meditate, but it was not something we continuously suggested they should or shouldn't do. It's just we left it to them to choose when they wanted to do it. But what we do find with children that meditate, particularly when we integrate that into classrooms, is that they have greater concentration, they have greater levels of, I guess, stable emotional, greatest emotional stability. And this constant being triggered is a big thing in our world right now. People saying all the time, you trigger me, or, very emotionally, disturbed very easily by life circumstances. But what we find with children that are meditating is that they have greater composure, greater capacity to weather some of those unmet expectations that can happen in life with greater resilience and greater stability. And that's a really important thing, because what we're getting is a lot of very emotionally charged kids, very emotionally reactive kids. And then what we're doing with them, unfortunately, is we're just medicating them so that they don't get so emotionally up and down in this sort of bipolarized state. And unfortunately, there's a much better pathway than that.
Yeah, incredible. And I know you spoke recently at Wonderlust. You did a live meditation. You were invited there. What did you find? How did you find, and you do a lot of speaking and facilitating um, different groups in person. Not sure what my question is. Sorry, it's quite hilarious today. Yeah, I don't know. I just want to hear more about that, your
Mm.
in-person events and facilitating. I mean, it's probably a ego question for me, knowing more about like being in front of people, but I know that I'll have a lot of, conscious leaders as well listening that might, you have such a great background already facilitating and experiencing. What does it kind of take as a someone to be up there in front of that amount of people? Like, yeah, because the public speaking is one of the biggest fears for people, but also as stepping up in front of, yeah, like holding the space and
Mm.
being that guide for people, not just online but in person.
Yeah, sure. With Wonderlust, just to give people some context, there was 5,000 people in the audience. I was on the Thursday night at the plenary in Melbourne with Jane Fonda in front of 5,000. Then we had 5,000 in Sydney at the ICC. And generally, most times when I'm in front of large audiences, there's just equanimity. So what it is it's not about me, it's about who in the audience needs to hear from me. So I flip the attention away from ego and
Mm-hmm.
self, small self, and move it to the need of other. And I tune into how can I go about creating transformation in these people's lives today. And what it does is it allows you to channel rather than to come from your own identity, and to let source move through you. So now I just become a clear conduit, a bit like you when you're channeling. I just allow source to move through me to go to the needs of the time. And I just am like a representative. Now, admittedly, depending on the size of the audience, there's a little bit of Tom that can arise, the personality, the myself, in those situations. So admittedly for the 5,000 in Melbourne, there was a little bit of nerves, I must admit. So I had a little bit of like, this was the biggest audience that I'd spoken in front of. So there was this new uncharted territory, which for the ego, anything that's uncharted territory, a zone of discomfort, a zone of unknown, then it can be cause a little bit of trepidation in the ego, which is what I experienced. So for Melbourne, there was a little bit of that just through the day, and then for Sydney, it was just a walk in the park. It was very calm and very enjoyable. So anytime where there's a big audience, whether it's on in person or whether it's in digitally, like on Zoom, most of the time I just try and flip the attention away from me to how do I support other and make it
Mm.
about them.
Yeah. And you mentioned briefly that you felt like you were channeling, live. I just want to touch on that a little bit
Sure.
because I've noticed, and because I'm in Tom's container, I've noticed sometimes in our calls you have channeled, and
Mm.
I've noticed when it wasn't. And so are you already aware that you kind of do that? Like what's your experience been with that?
Yeah, it's getting more and more so as life goes on, and that comes down to the emptiness. To channel means to get out of the way so that the channel can be a clear channel
Yes.
ultimately. And so
Yes.
that's obviously the work that you do is to allow that flow to move. If you think of a hose where you want the water to channel through the hose, now if that hose is clogged up with an ego identity or some substance, then the channel is blocked and it's not flowing. So interestingly, for Zen Academy, quite often I will sit and find and trust that the flow of knowledge will come through that needs to come through at that particular point in time. However, on some calls, I will come onto the call clearly with Tom with an idea of what I want to speak about. And so I
Yeah.
generally need to, let me just turn this power on because my battery's going to run out in a moment.
Yeah.
There we go. And what what tends to happen is this infusion of two things. One is that there's personality in Tom with, I think they probably need to hear this, and this is something that would be really good for their businesses. And I'll come with an idea of what might be good for the session. But what happens through the session is there'll be inquiry. Now, inquiry, I tend to find, opens the channel. And that will be someone might ask something or someone might be in a particular state. And then I'll just kind of create some space, not try and fill it in with what I think I should say, but just create some space to allow what needs to come through and just trust that to come through. So for my
Mm.
retreats, particularly when I'm doing retreats, most of the time I don't prepare at all for my retreats. Each session, I generally have a theme of what I think we're going to talk about in this session, but I just trust the channel to be clear and to provide what needs to be said.
Yeah, yeah, that's amazing. I have noticed that you've done that sometimes, and because I can identify is it a channel or not, because I'm so tapped in, obviously. And yeah, it's been cool watching you. I just wanted to mention that. And for anyone listening, because there is a big difference between, and like you said, it's about letting your mind. It's like you have to have a limitless mind or open
Yeah.
mind and not be filtering through you. And like, yeah, you've identified when you are and aren't doing it. And that's the biggest piece. Once you can do that, it's like you can channel anytime you want. Yeah.
I love the quote from Oprah Winfrey. She says, and she does Vedic meditation or transcendental meditation, and she says the constancy of stillness. So it's important that the few words here. The first line is the constancy of stillness. What that means is to have stillness constantly in your mind. It is only from that space can you create your best work and your best life. So what she's saying is, firstly, the constancy of stillness is a space, and from that space, you will create your best work and your best life. And that's because you're tapping into the infinite source of intelligence, the infinite source of potentiality, not the stuff that's in your brain. The brain is limited. There's only so much data in our brain that we can tap into and utilize as a source or method for creating a good life. And some of it might be, oh, how to do crypto trading or how to flip houses or how to learn how to be a channel. But what she's talking about is that intuitive channeled intelligence that guides you creatively through difficult moments or spacious moments where you want to start writing a book, or you might get an impulse to create a film, or you might get an impulse to do a coaching program or do a podcast. And so that space is the space that she's talking about that I find is emptiness that comes from the meditation.
Beautiful. Yeah, amazing. And we've spoken a little bit about the ego, and I do want to talk a little bit more into that. Um, because like obviously if you're going onto stage, you're like you really want to make impact and
Mm.
have that. But I feel that we get in the way. So it's like sometimes we have to remind ourselves to have that outwards, and like it's almost like we get trapped in our own pieces, our own shit, our own whatever. And
Mhm.
so it's like, how do we, like, I know it's like a reminder or maybe a discipline thing, but like how do we actually get out of that? Because I think that's the thing, we get in this cycle and then it's like, because consciously I'm aware of that, but then it's like we get in ourselves, trapped in our own little world, to then, do you know what I mean? Do you
Mhm.
know? Yeah.
Yeah, most of my, and people don't like to use this word in spiritual circles. I still use it. Most of my bad decisions, because they just were bad decisions.
Yeah.
Now, just remembering that most bad decisions started off as a good decision. So it was a good decision at the time, but it turned into be a bad decision. But most of my poor decisions, things like business and finance and things like that, or even personal habits and behaviors, um, were were coming from an ego identity, either from lack, from fear, from regret, from shame, from guilt. And so these are all ego identities, or
Mm.
ego constructs, ego characteristics. And so the, the key to this is coming back to what Oprah is talking about, is to get, how do we get into that space of almost like divine intuition? Now, I'm sure that doesn't mean we're still going to make perfect decisions, because again, things change along the way. It might be like, hey, it's a really good decision to buy Bitcoin, but then 3 weeks later, it's like, actually, no, that wasn't a good idea. Life can twist and turn and change course all the time. So it's less about constantly making perfect decisions, because life just won't work out that way. It's about being in flow so that you have this adaptive capacity. I remember a brilliant trader I used to be a broker for. So I was a broker and I used to clear trades for traders. And there was this one trader, he had this incredible ability to be moving along with a particular trade in one direction, realizing that that trade is actually a bad trade, pivoting and completely reversing that trade and turning it around the opposite direction so that it became a really good trade. And that ability to say, I was wrong, I don't think this is right, I'm going to change tact, I'm going to completely reverse my direction. And by reversing direction midway through the trade, it actually became a really successful trade. Now, how do we apply that principle to life? I'm doing things in life that seem to be kind of screwing up a lot. And it might be a particular behavioral pattern, it might be an addiction, it might be a way of communicating. And I've, the classic example, if anyone's seen this, it was a Seinfeld episode with George Costanza. And George was like, my life's just a mess, Jerry. And he just, everything was going wrong. And he thought, if everything's going wrong, then I need to do the opposite of everything that I'm doing. So it was the opposite George, he called himself. And so what he decided to do was do the exact opposite of everything he was doing, because if everything he was doing was going wrong, then he had to do the exact opposite to make everything go right. And so it was all about exactly what that trader was doing, was flipping his direction and reversing the direction of what he was going in. And I think a lot about this, sometimes I think about, well, if this has led to a lot of my unpleasant situations in life, what if I just reverse that? Did the opposite of that action, the opposite of that thought, the opposite of that emotion, whatever it is that we're entertaining. So we can play with the ego. This is the beautiful thing. We can use the ego to craft and refine the ego.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I don't know
Yeah.
if that answered your question, but it just
Yeah,
came
I
to me.
think I think it reminded me of, the 7 levels of David Hawkins' consciousness
Mhm.
scale, where you've got all of the, for anyone who doesn't know, you've got below the ego is like anger, fear, shame, guilt. So it's like addressing those again, because those are what's pulling you down. I definitely feel, from my experience and understanding like spirituality and consciousness, is the ego is quite it's like that's right in the middle. And once you pass that, you've kind of, in a sense, move through that test or
Mhm.
that
Mhm. Yeah,
battle.
absolutely.
And I think it's just like, yeah, going back to those lower pieces of what you need to address, whether it's fear or anger, and it's all within the self, right? It's all,
Yeah.
I feel this, etc. Yeah, and
I think
shifting
a
that.
lot of people call that shadow work. And I haven't done a lot of
Mm.
shadow work. I've done a little bit, but from probably need to do more. But from what I get from the people that I know that specialize in that space, it's such an important work to go and look at the parts of us that we may have been ignoring, even though they've still been playing out in our lives, that we need to go and maybe put under a bit of a microscope and have a little bit of dissecting and exploring, and yeah, just having a look like tucked away underneath there.
Yes, definitely, definitely.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining, Tom. It's been such an awesome chat, and I know everyone will find super high value from this episode. If anyone wants to find you, they want to learn Vedic meditation, or just connect with you, how do they do that?
I think a nice place I like to meet people is in Instagram. I find there's something really personal about that platform. TikTok and YouTube, it's hard to connect with people, but Instagram's a great place for someone to come and say hi and start following my content. Our website is where they'll be able to find all my workshops and retreats and coaching programs. So everything that I do will be listed there on my website. So those two places, tomcronin.com, and Instagram is Tom Cronin, all just one word.
Amazing. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks for sharing space and creating this space and doing the great work that you're doing. You're always inspiring me with the things that you do. So big gratitude to you.